Welcome to the Real News Network in Baltimore. I'm Kim Brown. On Thursday, the Senate Intelligence Committee held its first hearing as part of an inquiry as to whether or not there was collusion between Russian officials and the Trump campaign of 2016, along with the subsequent transition team into the White House. There's been a lot of speculation, a lot of leaks coming from the intelligence community about whether or not Donald Trump and his associates had extensive contact with Russian officials, and this Senate Intelligence Committee hopes to try to get to the bottom of that. But is this much to do about nothing, or is there actually smoke and subsequent fire? Well, to discuss this, we're joined today with Michael Hudson. Michael is a distinguished research professor of economics at the University of Missouri at Kansas City. He's also the author of many books, including The Bubble and Beyond and Finance Capitalism and Its Discontents, Killing the Host, How Financial Parasites and Debt Destroy the Global Economy, and most recently, J is for Junk Economics, a survivor's guide to economic vocabulary in an age of deception. He joins us today from New York. Michael, welcome back to The Real News.
Good to be here.
Michael, so this committee hearing seems to culminate weeks now of a lot of speculation, not just from the left, or not just from Democrats rather, about whether or not there was collusion between members of the Trump campaign and his transition team and Russians in order to propel him into the Oval Office. So your thoughts about today's opening hearing and whether or not the premise behind this hearing is valid in the first place?
The premise is not valid and it's fake news. And the one thing that the Senate committee does not want to find is anything about where these leaks come from. The one thing they do not want to do is have any discussion of the actual evidence. The evidence itself is notoriously fake. You remember when the DNC ostensibly hired somebody to find out who got their information. They hired a propaganda organization. They handle a lobbyist. They hired CrowdStrike, which is not only connected to the DNC, but to the pro-war neocon Atlantic Council, which is the lobbyist for pushing for military confrontation with Russia.
So, Michael, I'm sorry, not to cut you off really quick, but you're saying that this particular firm hired by the Democrats, that they hired this firm to look into the hacking of the DNC over the summer of 2016. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, but that's not what they tried to do. They didn't want them to. The one thing they did not want Crowdsource to do was look into the so-called hacking and who got the information. They hired Crowdsource as a propaganda organization to make accusations against Russia that had no evidence whatsoever. And James Clapper of the Deep State himself has said there is no evidence. So Crowdsource was hired because it's part of the neocon establishment, the Atlantic Council, and represents Ukraine. Also, the neo-Nazis in the Ukraine, they hired a propaganda organization. And the FBI said, they also went to the FBI, to Mr. Comey, who is a Democrat, and said, we don't want the FBI to look into it. Because if the FBI looks into it, they'll find that probably there wasn't Russian hacking. So what happened was that you had the Democrats come out and say something obviously false on the surface of it. 17 intelligence agencies have all believed that there's Russian hacking. The 17, this would include the Coast Guard, intelligence, and other things. The reality is there were only 3 intelligence agencies involved: the National Security Council, the CIA, and the FBI. None of these organizations came out and with any evidence whatsoever. And in fact, WikiLeaks, who actually got the information, said that it came from a DNC member who didn't hack it, who just copied the information, delivered it to him, and the hint that they told me when I was in London was that this was the hacker was the DNC worker who was mysteriously killed in an unsolved crime a few days later, walking in the park. So what should be asked is, how did WikiLeaks get the information from the DNC? Nobody's asking that. They don't want to look at it because they want to make the unjustified claim that this was Russian hacking, and the intelligence professionals all sort of agree that anybody could have done the hacking. There's no evidence that of one person or another, if indeed there was hacking. Neither the FBI nor the NSC nor the CIA have ever examined the computer to try to find out. Only the propaganda lobbyist organization that the DNC hired for essentially to try to fight Trump, and not only fight Trump, but to fight Trump's attempt to make a rapprochement with Russia, to try to fight against the ISIS and al-Nusra that the Obama administration was backing in Syria and in Libya. And the Russians have met with the Americans and said, look, let's have a meeting between the Justice Department and the Russia Prosecutor General on cybercrime. We want an international treaty against it. Well, completely open. The United States refused it because they said, well, we can't sign any international treaty because then we would have to obey its rules. And we have no intention whatsoever of obeying any rules of any international treaty when it comes to cybercrime. In other words, America can do cybercrime and hacking of foreign countries, but claims that they're hacking us when there's no evidence at all. And why is this fake story coming out? It's come out in order to discredit any attempt that President Trump may have to wind down the confrontation with Russia, to try to do what Ronald Reagan did and disarm the atomic warfare, to stop the buildup of atomic weapons around Russia, and basically to wind back the military-industrial complex. The neocons and the military-industrial complex are all sort of a unit because the military-industrial complex needs an enemy. It needs somehow bases to put all of these weapons that it's producing at enormous profits in, and the only place to put them, logically, is around Russia and China. And when you put the weapons that close to these countries, you're increasing the risk of war. And Trump wanted to wind that down. And the neocons, the Democratic Party, the Atlantic Council, and the Senate Committee, there are the pro-war, anti-Russian group. So
Michael,
they have an agenda.
Let me ask you about, in your opinion, what is the difference between the so-called Russian reset of the early part of the Obama administration when Barack Obama was sending Hillary Clinton and then eventually John Kerry out to negotiate with the Russians, particularly about nuclear treaties in order to draw down the amount of nuclear weapons in each country's respective stockpiles? Now, the Russian reset has been largely touted as a failed diplomatic attempt because of different relationships, the dynamic, I suppose, between Barack Obama and Vladimir Putin. But so what's the difference between the Obama-Russian reset and what Donald Trump is attempting to do?
Just the names attached to them. The Russian reset wasn't a reset at all. It was really a new Cold War. He appointed a virulent anti-Russian as the ambassador to there, someone who was trying to promote an orange revolution and local protest movements within Russia.
Ambassador Michael McFaul.
Michael McFaul, yeah, notorious anti-Russian, just the kind of person you would not want to have as a serious ambassador. And when Kerry tried to make some agreements with Russia in Syria, the military immediately worked against them. So sending Kerry was just sort of a distraction because it was really very early in Obama's administration. He gave in to the NSA and the CIA and said, "Okay, boys, I'll do whatever you want. Just tell me what to do." And he didn't. There was never any intention of dismantling military buildup, but just the opposite, to build up, which is exactly what occurred. And Trump wanted to reverse the new Cold War pressure of the Democrats, the Obama administration. And you see what they're trying to do. They say, if you oppose the Atlantic Council and the neocons, we're going to essentially wreck your career. And that's what the House committee is doing. The attention you should be focusing on is not the Senate investigation, but the House investigation under Nunes. They're trying to say, wait a minute, who leaked all this national security information about Trump? Trump used an obsolete word, saying they wiretapped me, and people don't wiretap anymore. When I grew up, we were wiretapped by J. Edgar Hoover to wiretap politicians to put together the blackmail files. But the NSA now is doing computer. They just go right into the server and they hack, not wiretap. And if they don't do it, they'll ask the British to do it. So they can say, we didn't do any hacking. We're not saying that the British didn't. The House committee wants to see who leaked this information on Trump. This is like the Russians used to do under Stalin, called kompromat. The secret police would get blackmail information and they'd leak it to political enemies. That's what's happening in the United States. The CIA and the NSC and the FBI now have the equivalent of J. Edgar Hoover's blackmail files. And if you don't have real blackmail, you'll make it up. And I think that's what they're doing against Trump. They're making it up, that there's smoke with the Russia connection. And there isn't any smoke that anybody's found. Clapper is even acknowledged. There's nothing that they've found. So this is purely a propaganda effort to make Trump too politically unable to make a real reset with Russia or a real wind down of the military confrontation with Russia, not only directly on its borders, but also in Syria, Libya, and elsewhere in the Near East.
Well, if it's a propaganda mission, whoever is initiating it is doing a bang-up job, because there's a hell of a lot of smoke floating around in the news about these alleged connections between Russia and the Trump administration and the Trump White House. So we will certainly keep an eye on the Senate Intelligence Committee hearings, as well as the House Intelligence Committee hearings when they resume under Congressman Nunes, who has been under fire himself for his very close relationship with the Trump White House. So there's a lot going on here, Michael, and we appreciate your analysis today. We've been speaking with Michael Hudson. He is a distinguished research professor of economics at the University of Missouri at Kansas City. Michael, thank you again, as always.
Good to be here. Thank you for the discussion.
And thanks for watching the Real News Network.